This is not going to sound like a normal sermon. He asked me to do one on transgenderism. So he chose it for me, so I'm going to do it. Not the end itself, but a means to a grander end. Please pay attention and listen. If you got anything to say, please come talk to me. I'm going to present this. I've done, obviously, some thought on this issue. You're not going to get this because this is highly not convenient. And I'm going to tell you where I got all this. Before we do this, let me do a personal advertisement. So this is my response to COVID. I have been developing a lot of videos. So I have over 100 videos in my YouTube site, as well as Instagram. And you can check out all these things. I deal with contemporary issues. Transgenderism, more fuller versions are there. CRT, what's going on in Ukraine. This is treated from a comprehensive perspective, of course, with biblical lens also. So I want you to check that out. Also, there are about 8 or 10 videos in Spanish, se habla español. So if you have people who need to hear this in Spanish, there are also some in Spanish. Also, I have my own blog and my blog, so we deal with, I think, pretty critical issues, treated as it deserves to be treated. So if you're interested in these matters, there are resources, and so that's my personal advertisement. So check it out. And I think you may not like it, but you will learn something, All right. Okay. Okay, transgenderism, not the end itself, but a means to a grander end. Okay, now keep in mind these 3 images, okay? Because I'm going to repeat these images. One is this. When New Testament came to surface in the 4th century, the dominant religious framework was animism, the worship of objects. So there's a verse in Romans that they were worshiping reptiles, rocks, and things of nature. So theism, believing on monthly God. So we ate that fish. And we were doing fine until biology came along in the name of evolution, and they gobbled up theology. So people laugh at those who believe that evolution is a theory, not a fact. We can talk about that a little later, but I'm just telling you what's going on in academia. And then came cultural anthropology. They are now the dominant framework in the academia. Culture is sovereign. Biology is dismissed because, we talk about transgenderism, because biology actually is in a way unable to warrant transgenderism. Yeah, so culture won. Biology is losing, has lost. Because whatever biology says, if you don't line up to the reigning paradigm, then you are sexist. So this is the first image. I'm going to come back to this later. And then also, trying to help people with confusion over their sexual identity. Note that I didn't say gender identity. We have a great confusion over those 2 words. Gender and sex are certainly related terms, but they're not synonymous. Once you use that term in a way that we do, interchangeably, then you already have been co-opted by those who want to make this the universal truth. So sexual identity, trying to help people with confusion about sexual identity by saying biological sex is a social contract is like trying to exterminate a bug in the house with a bomb. Yeah, you can certainly kill the bug, but you're going to destroy the house at the same time. So there's a bug, we need to deal with that issue, but why do you blow up the house to do that? That just is unwise and very harmful. So keep that in mind. It is what we call overkill. Definition, I got it, a destructive capacity greatly exceeding that required for a given target. This is the reigning paradigm. Biological sex is a social contract. If they're going to cancel J.K. Rowling for disagreeing with that, that tells you how far this has gone. This is church now, so you need to hear the truth. So I'm just going to share the truth about this issue. And then the third image that I want you to keep in mind is that what God gave to mankind is 10 commandments. transcendent, absolute, and not negotiable. Now, there are aspects that is culture-bound, but I'm talking about main essential set of values that God given us. They're commandments. They're not 10 suggestions. Suggestions, relative and malleable. The suggestion of the one who is in power emerges as the truth at the moment. It's a power game. And that's what's going on. One who has power, his opinion becomes the truth. So I want you to keep that image in mind. Now, I need to make it into a sermon. So I'm going to throw out 2 verses that we will read. So I'm going to frame everything in terms of Ephesians 6:12, which says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual force of evil in the heavenly realm. I'm not even going to pretend to do exegetical work on this one, but what is covered in yellow, spiritual force of evil, refers to the God of this age. 2 Corinthians 4:4, it is Satan. I know that term, you still believe that? I mean, if there's no Satan, nothing makes sense, including what's going on in Ukraine on the heavenly realm. And so God of this age is the devil, and he needs agents to confuse, make things certain, uncertain, and create a sense of lostness. So with respect to transgenderism and issues of that nature, their agents have been what we call progressive, secular, cultural aid. Now, if we talk about race issues, then we can bring conservative on the God of this age, but that's not what I have to speak on. So I'm not just picking on them, but the issue makes it necessary that I bring them out. But if you bring some other issue out, I can bring the conservative because they're not exactly perfect either. So that you don't think that, you think your conservatives are all fine. No, they're not. But that's not the issue that I will also address today. So what they bring, all those 3 images, in short, is argument against the knowledge of God, which creates confusion, uncertainty, and lostness. I'm going to try to demonstrate why they are arguments against God. And this is what we are told to do. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. 2 Corinthians 10:5. So this is what I'm trying to do. Take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Okay? So that's the sermon part. Okay, transgenderism, not the end itself, but a means to a grander end. What is this grander end? This is Enlightenment. Dead white Europeans, 18th century. You recognize the name, Voltaire? Now, you guys are university students, so you might remember some of these names. Voltaire, Kant, Hegel, Feuerbach, Lessing, Schleiermacher. These are names of the Enlightenment, reason over faith people. Now, to us now, many of those were Western values, but they were saying that Western value is universal. Okay? And as a result, what was produced was imperialism and colonialism. Well, we have the light. Let's share the light with people in the continent of Africa, Asia. So they went, I guess that meant well at first, but then they ended up conquering them and start exploiting them. So they are not well received these days. But you notice 2 names that are missing here? 2 names that should be up there. One name is Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and then the other one is Friedrich Nietzsche. Now again, I won't explain every single thing because it's too long. I'm going to assume that you know. If you don't know, then you need to know, so listen to me. So these 2 names, they were in 18th, 19th century, but I left them out because they don't belong in the Enlightenment. They were against Enlightenment. You see, you need to know these 2 people because they did not agree with people such as Voltaire or Schleiermacher or Kant. They broke from them. Nietzsche is actually called, quote, the true father of postmodernism because in postmodernism, every truth is so-called truth local, regional. That's what he actually ended up saying. He rejected the Enlightenment's faith in reason, denied the existence of universal truth, and discarded traditional religion and morality. according to historian Kramer. Now, that has to get to America, but without the methods of Rousseau, it won't get here. Rousseau is called the father of Romanticism. And I'm going to make a point that without Rousseau's contribution, Nietzsche's postmodernism doesn't make wave in the United States. And that channel was culture. Culture was the channel in which Rousseau's postmodernism, denial of absolute truth, came to the United States. Rousseau, he paved the way for inverting the racial hierarchy. He said that actually it is the reverse. The tribal people, untainted by human advance and technology, are actually superior than us. He said humans are born with potential for goodness. So he broke with Christian theology of man born as sinful. But civilization prompting envy makes humans bad. Primitive men are cultural superiors to Westerners because their life is one of nature and free of guilt. So they do not suffer from all the ills that is created by human civilization. Therefore, he came to conceptualize the term called noble savage. The wonderful human beings are somewhere in islands untainted by human progress. So he romanticized. He never set foot outside France, I don't think. He never met a primitive person, but he theorized, he romanticized that there is somebody out. So he broke with people of enlightenment. Enlightenment, we are reasonable, we know truth, but no. Actually, your reasonableness is making you tainted. So he broke from enlightenment. Nietzsche broke with them. Nietzsche said, no. Western is a Western truth, not universal truth. All truths are relative. You got to get to the United States. But how? It's through the channel of the culture. Romanticizing noble savage. Okay, now, I'm going to introduce you three people. These are very important people that you may or may not have read about when you went to college. Her name is Margaret Mead. And the book that made her famous among many is called Coming of Age. She wrote that after spending 9 months in Samoa in the 1920s. Quote, this book influenced the way people were brought up she was celebrity scholar in the 30s and 40s. She's a household name. And her professor at Barnard College is Ruth Benedict. Another book that's very important, Patterns of Culture, 1934. Millions of copies were sold in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s in different languages. They were highly influential in how we see what truly influences human behavior. Is it nature or is it culture? And they were lovers. It is important that you know that. Gossip, no. Margaret Caffrey is a professor at Memphis University. She did a biography on Ruth Benedict, and she made it very clear that they became lovers. I think one trip they made in 1920s. Now, there's another person that you need to know. It is their mentor, Franz Boas. He's from Germany. He left Germany before Nazi came about, and he became the father of American anthropology. I told you before that biology is nothing right now, okay? A biologist who says that transgenderism doesn't have any biological base, he's going to be canceled. So cultural anthropology won. Boas, brilliant anthropologist, he founded the American Anthropology from Columbia University. Every noble anthropologist would come from Columbia under his tutelage. And one famous quote, what constitutes courtesy, modesty, and good manners and ethical standard is not universal, relative. You see, when Ruth Benedict and Margaret Mead went out in the field, according to Margaret Caffrey, who wrote a biography of Ruth Benedict, this is what she did a PhD in something at Memphis University. She wrote, the evidence from old field work show that many conflicts, as Benedict wrote, which we in our culture in 1923 regarded as the inevitable human nature, were by no means universal. What does that mean? Okay, conflict we feel over moral issues. 3 issues in particular, because they dealt with that. Should I feel guilty if I commit adultery? Conflict. In the Western world, under Judeo-Christian value. Oh, adultery, I feel guilty. Should I have sex with someone of the same sex? If you did that in 1920s, oh, it is abominable what I did. I, as a man, live as a woman, vice versa. They were dealing with this issue in 1920s and 30s. What they're saying was that in the West, you feel guilty about this issue, but when you go out there, though, they don't feel that way. Therefore, this is not a universal moral values, it's just regional values. So we should bring more free people, the values for more free people to change our way so that when I commit adultery, I don't feel bad. When I have sex with somebody of same sex, I don't feel bad. I, as a man, live as a woman, and vice versa, I shouldn't feel bad because there is no universal standard. As Boaz said, there is no ethical standard that is universal. And these anthropologists left to find those people who live like that. So me went to Samoa, and then and then Ruth Benedict went to where Pueblo Indians live, probably Colorado, Arizona, that area, 2010, 1930s. So according to Margaret Caffrey, they mapped out a plan to investigate them in the field so that someday we might really know. Know what? They speculated together on what in society derived from biology and what from culture. They earnestly want to know, we behave this way, is it biology or culture? Well, their response, they went to these places and they said, we found the noble savage. Pueblo Indians, Samoans fit the description of Rousseau, untainted by the reason, the humanities, and technology of enlightenment. They stay pure, untainted. And they said, we found them. We found the noble savage. Quote from Denis de Souza, his book, for me, the Samoans were a contemporary example of Rousseau's noble savage. Samoans were people whom Westerners could envy and try to emulate. They were not racial inferiors, referring to the noble savage, but cultural superiors. Let's decode this. What did they really say? Because after they went out and came back, they produced these books. We found noble savage based on how they live. Is it culture or is it biology? Are there universal ethics? Or maybe everything is local? I want you to know that from the very outset, the invoking of non-Western culture and non-Western people was a means to an end. It wasn't because, oh, we love non-white people, they are the victims of white people, therefore, it was never 1920s, but they were trying to find these people to prove something. That is a grander end, and transgenderism fall in that place. It's a means to an end, but what is that end? Meaning what? The end goal wasn't about being more tolerant of non-Western people, respecting their cultures, but to use their alleged cultural practices to relativize and neutralize traditional biblical morality. That's what they were after. So if you already believe that there's no absolute values and universal values, then there's no way you're going to agree with me. But I believe that there are universal values, such as lying is wrong, torturing babies is wrong, killing innocent people like what Hitler did is wrong, what Putin is doing wrong. These are universal values. Taking money from people and using it for yourself while people are out on the street like what Bernie Matt up there, that's wrong. Every people in the world have a core value where that is wrong, that is wrong. I think we agree that there are universal values. So 10 suggestions is what they wanted to suggest. And culture won over biology. What biology? In other words, for them, they want to present that non-Western culture pro-homosexuality, pro-transgender. It is to say, pro-non-white people is to be pro-homosexuality, pro-transgender, and we're going to go back to their writing. I'm going to let you read some of the things they wrote. They're going to attack three issues: homosexuality, adultery, and transgenderism in their work done in 1920s and 30s. Margaret Mead, she said, casual homosexual practices are the usual manifestations of most association between young people of same sex. 1920s in Samoa. Samoans scope at the tales of lifelong devotion. Many adulteries occur, which hardly threaten the continuity of established relationship. In all of these comparisons between Samoan and American culture, our attitude toward our own solution must be greatly broadened and deepened by a consideration of the way in which other people have met the same problem, realizing that our own ways are not humanly inevitable nor God ordained. That's what she was after. Nothing is ordained by the divine, but the fruit of long and turbulent evolutionary sociological progress and development and change. Ruth Benedict, both of them were very interested in homosexuality. I didn't talk to them, but they were in that relationship, so I'm thinking, oh, I could get it. They felt probably condemned in 1920s and 30s when they were doing this. And they would like to probe to those people who say that is wrong. Well, to you it is wrong, but to them that's not wrong, so it's relative. Ruth Benedict, we have only to turn to other cultures, noble savage culture, to realize that homosexuals have by no means been inadequate to the social institution. For the American Indian, Pueblo Indian, homosexuals are often regarded as exceptionally able. Right after that, Benedict turns to transgenderism, but at that time, nobody uses that term. And then she began to praise it. This is from cultural pattern. In most North America, there exists the institution of bardash, man-woman. These men-women were regarded as good healers, the genial organizers of social affairs that were socially placed, not rejected. And one of the best known of all the Zunis, the man-woman Wiwa, was certainly the strongest person in Zuni, both mentally and physically, a chief personage, a leader in all kinds of craft. Three issues: adultery, homosexuality, transgenderism. They were saying non-white people thought nothing of these things, so it must not be absolute values. Let's bring them to America. Let's be free. Because nothing is dictated by the divine nor biology. It's all culture. Thus, I said the end goal wasn't about being more tolerant of non-Western people and respecting culture, but use their alleged practices to relativize and neutralize traditional biblical morality. By the way, Samoan students began to come to the United States and study in the universities of America. When they got a hold of Mead's book, they were greatly upset for her to misrepresent the culture. Come on. She didn't even know the language, stayed there 9 months. You really know that culture? I read the whole book, so come on. I lived in Mexico 11 years. I know Mexico culture pretty well. It didn't happen in 9 months. And I knew the language. But that's for another time. 10 suggestions. So, this is what society should look like. Civilization founded upon a core set of universal, absolute ethical morals and values. By the way, conservatives who say, yeah, have done a pretty poor job living like this. We all know that. So you give me that sermon, I'll do that one. But I won't have to do that one, so I can't do that one. But I'm letting you know that I'm not taking side with a conservative. But civilization founded upon a core set of universal, absolute, ethical, moral value. The grander end that these three were going after was they wanted to This is, here it is, I didn't see it. A civilization founded upon a core set of universal, ethical, moral values. And what they were after is, let's see whether we can establish civilization upon relative, ethical, moral, and values in the name of culture. So we are rebuilding our society on two legs. There are no agreed values that we are all adhering. Everything is regional. Everything is relative to identity group. I'm going to tell you something. You put our society on two-legged chair, it's going to collapse. I need to explain more, but next time. Oh, you can see my video. I did all that there. Okay, second one. Biological sex is not a social construct. Look, this is the main means which to say that transgenderism is a true reality. Why biological sex is not a social construct? It is an undeniable biological reality designed by God and verified by science. Male and female, God created them. Is that enough? To me it is, but it's not enough for you. Therefore, I began to read this book, Women, Men, and Society. Did you read this book? This was a textbook that my daughter used when she attended University of Virginia. 500 pages, so I read the whole thing. A best-selling textbook at the collegiate level that looks at gender. Written by who's who in sociology and scientists in this area. And my curiosity was, what is the science beyond transgenderism? That's what I wanted to know. There must be science, and they went there. If you haven't read this book, let me give it to you, but I'm going to quote them lest you think that I'm making things up. They said, we should stop thinking of sex as a unidimensional characteristic with dichotomous attributes. Similarly, gender, what we generally call masculinity and femininity, is far from being either-or phenomenon. In other words, no more binary. Male and female, that's a traditional, value, traditional thinking. We don't, there's more than two. Let's stop with this unidimensional, dichotomous way of thinking sex. Okay, see, they're from the left. So they're not conservative. So I read that book. And then they said, neither sex nor gender is dichotomous, binary. Meaning what? Meaning there is more to sex and gender than just a category of male and female. Okay, that's what you are told to believe, right? Okay. What they're saying is basically what you've been told by the media. Neither sex nor gender is dichotomous. Biological sex is a social construct. Gender identity can be expressed in a variety of ways. But as I read that book, I realized that these authors were saying more than they intended. I don't know they were aware of it, but I realized that, you know what? You shouldn't say these things if you really want to promote this way of thinking. Okay, now, when I say sex, now I learned all this from them. I didn't learn this from Bible because Bible doesn't cover every single issue. It just covers a lot of important spiritual facts that we need to know to be saved and incidental facts that relate to spiritual truths that I mentioned, but something we need to read like this. So when you say biological sex, they said there are actually 4 kinds of sex. Chromosomal sex, hormonal sex, gonadal sex, and genital sex. Also, there are 4 kinds of sex, okay? Chromosomal sex means, about the 23rd chromosome pair that determines sex. XY for men and XX for women. Hey, binary! Hey, male and female! Well, it's not quite like that. Hormonal sex means female produce, okay? Hormonal sex, females produce more estrogen than males, and males produce more testosterone than females. They produce both, but men just produce more testosterone, and women more estrogen. Women produce 3 types of estrogen: estradiol, estradiol, and estrogen. Men produce only one kind, estradiol. Very different, is it not? Gonadal sex is females have ovaries and males have testes. Transgender person who used to be a man doesn't need to worry about getting ovarian cancer or menstruate. Because biology. No worries. A transgender person who used to be a woman doesn't need to worry about getting prostate cancer. It's impossible because of gonadal sex. And then genital sex. Wow, they have different sex organs. I need not say any further. So I said, saying more than intended. What did they say? This is what they said. When we talk about sex, we may be referring to chromosomal sex, hormonal sex, and gonadal sex, or genital sex, although for most individuals, these are consistent with the category of male or category female. Okay, thanks. For most people, it's binary, male or female. Well, thanks for letting me know what I already knew. But you see, they said most. So what does that mean? For most people, there's a clarity about their biological sex. They are either male or female. How do you know? Well, I'm just going by experts, you see. Right. So if you better to talk to them. The best-selling textbook in universities, read in UVA, Harvard, and schools like that. So I think I'm using a pretty reliable source. Okay, so you don't choose your biological sex because you are born with it. Designed by God, verified by science. But we need a further clarity on this matter because they said most, since it says that for most individuals, biological sex is consistent with the category male or the category female, implies that there are exceptions, right? I learned that there are exceptions. Reading Woman, Man, or Society, I learned that there are exceptions in chromosomal sex and hormonal sex. There are 4 situations in which you could have a transgender tension, biologically speaking. 4. Okay, in the area of chromosomal sex and hormonal sex, are these few people in society who don't fit this binary category of male and female in chromosomal sex and hormonal sex, and I'm going to tell you what they are. Are they the ones who are afflicted with transgender struggle? Leah Thomas, I live in Philly, so this is local news. The transgender swimmer who's smashing all the records swimming as a woman for Penn. So does she have one of these 4 conditions in the area of chromosomal sex or hormonal sex? Okay, chromosomal sex. Yes, there are people who do not fit into the binary of XX for women and XY for men in the 23rd chromosome that determines sex. One is called Klinefelter syndrome, the other one, Turner syndrome. I'm learning this. I read this many years ago. I'm learning as I go, oh, so there are exceptions. Oh, maybe these are the people biologically have these tensions. Klinefelter syndrome affects 1 in every 500 male births. It's a genetic condition. Those affected have an extra X chromosome in addition to the normal male match, so they are not XY, they are XXY. They have 1 more X, Klinefelter syndrome. So according to the book, phenotypically males, but with tendency toward femaleness, like what? Enlarged breast, underdeveloped body, hair, long legs, and hands. Oh, so I guess these are the kind of folks who have this transgender complexity and tension. That's what I was wondering. I think you're wondering too. And then there's a Turner syndrome, affects 1 in every 2,500 female. Missing the X in the usual female pair of XY, they only have one X. So does it affect the physicality? Books that have virtually no ovaries, lack most sexual characteristics, and are sterile. So in that sense, it affects their gonadal sex because many of them do not have ovaries. Okay, so in the area of chromosomal sex, we got Klinefelter syndrome and Turner syndrome. Abnormal chromosomal condition, XXY for males, X females, not XX, and not XY for XXY. So that's the question I had. Do these people with genetic abnormalities encounter transgender struggle like Leah Thomas? Okay, so let me go back to the book. Research with Turner syndrome female, just one X, not normal XX, and as a result, no ovaries for most of them, lacking most sexual characteristics, and sterile, reveals stereotypical femininity in their behavior and personalities. No, they do not experience transgender tension. They lack one X, but they think, feel, behave like women, not men. That's what I learned. Oh, so that's not it. What about Klinefelter syndrome? Men, they have one more X, characterized by enlarged breast and underdeveloped body hair, among other traits. The researchers of the world level, many XXY men are no different from XY men in terms of social and emotional characteristics. Page 36. Oh, so yeah, they have additional X, but they feel and behave just like men. Okay, no transgender tension there. Conclusion based on science. People who have abnormal chromosomal conditions do not experience transgender struggle. Their behavior and how they feel correspond to their biological sex. Okay, you know what? We're talking about science, right? Science. Okay, well, science. What about hormonal sex? Okay, now this one a bit more difficult to explain, but you're smart, right? Okay, it's a situation in which genetic males, biological males, when they were in one womb, because they were unresponsive to androgen, male hormone, if testes secretes during the prenatal stage and early on in stage of development, androgen, male hormone, they're not receptive, they're not getting the male hormone. So they're born with external genitalia of female. So when they're born, parents say, it's a girl, it's a boy, but because of their physicality at the birth, as a result of not getting enough androgen, they think it's a girl. It's a girl. So, according to the book, they look like girls at birth, so they are typically raised as girls by their parents, even though they are biological male. It's called DHT deficiency syndrome. You can look it up. DHT deficiency syndrome, male babies, because they did not respond to androgen, male hormone, they're male, but they look like females. It's a girl. There's no other way to look at it except to say they're a girl. However, later at a puberty, quote, because of presence of normal testes, when the testes begin to produce large amounts of testosterone, the external genitalia change. They have testes, produce testosterone during their puberty, and then genitalia that look like female begin to develop. I hope it's okay to use this language. The penis grows, the scrotum descends, and the body becomes more muscular. In other words, at puberty, they no longer look like female. They are now males, which is their biological sex. Hey, it's a boy! Are you going to raise him as a boy or girl? Now you know he's a boy. But this person has been conditioned to be a girl. I think you agree with me. In today's world, telling these biological boys to live as boys, contrary to how they were culturally conditioned, having been reared as girls, meaning they were culturally conditioned to live as female even though they were biological male, would undermine transgenderism since it holds that sexual identity is determined not by biology, but by cultural condition. So I think if you say to these parents who say, oh, they're boy, okay, let me raise you as a boy, you might say you're transphobic. Culture, man, not biology. Well, therefore, it could be a reason that any attempt to return to biological sex will be met with great mental anguish. After all, you're saying that the girl and this person, although is a boy, you should continue to raise him as a girl, because if you all of a sudden raise him as a boy, that'd be a really mentally tough for this person. So you should continue to raise him as a girl, not as a boy, even though now you know that it's a boy. That's how we would think. This is Julian Imperator McGinley, endocrinologist at Cornell Medical School. You can look it up. She's a legit. Her study was included in the book. So she was very curious. You know what? That's not what she found after studying 18 males in a particular Dominican Republic village where intermarriage was very common. She went over there, studied 18 males. In other words, having been born with this condition, meaning when they were babies, male hormone wasn't receptive to a male hormone, so they were born looking like girl, but at puberty, it's a boy. So having been born with this condition, they were reared as girls until it was discovered that they were male around the time of puberty. After that discovery, their parents raised them as boys. Oh, they're boys. Let's raise them as boys. Reared as girls, after puberty, raised as boys. Okay, Cornell endocrinologist, after her study, said this: these individuals experience little difficulty in changing their sex and gender identities at puberty when their genitalia masculinized. Her quote was easily switched. But that contradicts what we are told. They begin to be raised according to biological sex. After being reared as girl cultural condition, biology seemed to prevail. Now, of course, this book did not. Now, what this means is that cultural conditioning couldn't overcome the pull from the biological sex. Yes, the book contained many critics who challenged her study. So I read all the criticism aimed at her, and this is what I found. The attempts to change their sex, now this is what the critics said. The attempts to change their sex and gender identities at puberty or in adulthood are sometimes not as smooth as Imperator McGinley and others maintain. Sometimes not as smooth? That is neither strong nor very convincing rebuttal. For you could say that about typical teenagers who experience identity confusion during their puberty. That wasn't a very strong comeback. Sometimes not as smooth. And you want to change the whole ballgame based on that? These are the facts. I mean, I didn't know before I read this book. I'm a Bible guy, I read this book, cover to cover. And this is what I found out. And you want me to tell you that something opposite, instead of finding this out from legitimate scientists? Now, that's third possibility where transgender tension could happen, but we don't have that there. What about the fourth one? It's called adrenogenital syndrome. It's the reverse affecting girls. Those individuals whose genetic sex is male and who were exposed to androgens, again, male hormone, demasiado, too much, in the womb after their internal reproductive organ, like ovaries and uterus had developed, they got heavy doses of androgens, these girls in the womb. Consequently, the androgens have a masculinizing effect on the external genitals, like, but it's in there, the clitoris is enlarged and may resemble a small penis. So, it's a boy. Oh, it's a boy. So they began to be raised as a boy. Now, so they were wondering, so are these girls the ones who are like tomboys, who like man things? And so they researched those people who actually had this condition, and they interviewed them. The researchers have studied these females to determine whether the excessive exposure to male hormone in utero affects their gender identities or behavior. Excessive exposure to male hormone, do they feel and act like males, is what they want to find out. And this is what I read, conclusion of the research. Most researchers report that these girls are not significantly more physically aggressive than normal girls, and that many older girls with this condition, androgenital syndrome, do express a desire for romance, marriage, and motherhood in their future. A follow-up study of 12 women with this condition, too much androgen when they were in the womb, androgenital syndrome, found this: 4 had married and none showed any difficulty in establishing relationship with men. That's what I found from textbook used in major universities. So I'm supposed to teach you, biological sex is social construct, boys, girls. There's no such a thing. You believe that? You don't believe me? Then read this book. That belief is a social construct. What about gender identity? So far, I have mostly used the word sex, not gender. Why? Well, because while gender and sex are related, they are not the same thing. Related, but they're not the same. In truth, legitimate transgender, people who do have this issue, I'm sure there are, it's actually a gender issue, not a sex issue. Because there is no biological base for transgenderism. If you can find other possible biological causes that need to be studied, I didn't find any more than 4 that I just cited. In each case, found to be one thing. It's actually a gender issue. Gender, how's it? What is gender? A term, gender, goes better with trait, gender trait. And roles, as in gender roles, attributed to 2 biological sexes. They're related, but they're not the same thing. Stop using them interchangeably, even if your school does. What is at issue? Let's go back to the textbook. This is what they said. Should a biological given, maleness and femaleness, gonadal sex, testis, ovaries, hormonal sex, XX, XY, hormonal sex, estrogen, more women produce more estrogen, and men produce more testosterone. Should a biological given sex, maleness and femaleness, be used as the basis for constructing a social category? Yeah, it's a social category that we call masculinity and femininity. Like, hey, manliness, womanliness. We're talking about that. Since biological females have certain traits different from men, you know what, I just went rogue on people. Since biological females have certain traits different from men, should that determine their social roles and the kind of work they do? This is an issue. This is an issue. And you know what? Church could do a better job with this. So I just condemn the group that I represent. But you don't want to blow up the house to kill a termite. Just kill the termite. You see, in the traditional world, because of the way they saw women due to their traits, based on their biology, their jobs were limited to mainly, for example, they were working as nurses or seamstresses or stay-at-home mom, but men were the ones who were scientists and engineers. Because women with their traits are more suited for nursing, but not doctor. Seamstresses is running the show. A woman stay home and take care of the babies, while men Now, this is a world that many have lived in the 50s and 60s, but the logic was, well, women are of a certain characteristics and they're suited for this role. That actually was an ad that came out in the 50s. Even a closed-minded Christian man wouldn't want to go back to that world. But look at 1950s ads. It's incredible the kind of ads they had. If that's what you're reacting against, well, you have reason. But the reason was women's physicality produced certain trait. So female femininity means you do this, but you don't do that. Two important questions. One, are gender roles fixed? Can they be changed? Second, okay, and then so first, and let me just answer that question and then put in the second question. Biblically, no, gender roles are not fixed for the most part. I won't cover the most part today, but gender roles are not fixed. Bible. Many Christians, particularly in the past, stay-home mom is a biblical model. If you don't do that, then you're not being biblical. But actually, no woman in the Bible fits that mold because they were not living in a suburbia like 1950s. It was an agrarian society where women did everything. You ever read Proverbs 31? She did it all. She bought land. She sold clothes. She raised kids. She planted crops. I don't think she had time to sleep. That woman is a modern woman. You go read it. You go, yeah, she kicked some heinies. She's good. So you're telling me that woman should stay home and take care of kids because that's biblical? Well, it doesn't seem to be saying that. And also, despite male headship, several women led. Deborah led Israel, and Athaliah, though evil, she led Judah. If being evil makes a king no king, then all 20 kings of Israel were no king because every one of them were evil. She was evil, but she was queen nonetheless. Seventh king or queen. Abraham submitted to his wife twice. Sleep with Hagar. Okay. Kick out Hagar and Ishmael. He didn't really want to that one, but he did. So it's in the Bible. So I go, yeah, gender roles are not fixed for the most part. Second question, can gender traits be overcome? Yes, gender traits can be overcome for the most part, and you can do all this without rejecting biological sex. You know what I mean? Don't touch it. You could do it all. Don't touch it. Look, while gender roles are subject to cultural conditions and encouragement, parents are encouraging the girls can do the things that they were not told to do before, gender traits are subject to individual effort. Just like water. You put it in a very cold place, it becomes solid. Up there, vapor, here, liquid. So environment does control the formation of H2O. I would say gender role, for the most part, is subject to cultural conditions and encouragement, and gender traits are subject to individual effort. Okay, what do you mean by gender traits are subject to individual effort? Well, listen, your father and you're raising a daughter, and you want your daughter to grow to be general and scientist and mathematician and do the things that men were associated with in the traditional world. So, daughter, be masculine. How about you gun and how about you truck? And I say, okay, that's your parental decision. Okay, but just don't call her he. She'll be confused. You think you have to call her he to encourage her to do the things that men were associated in the traditional world? You think? I don't think so. Just give a gun if you like to. Give a truck, the traditional toys for boys. Cultural conditioning. But don't call her your boy. So they can be both things. Not okay. That is blowing up the house to kill one termite. I would say that's kind of stupid. Now, once the term sex and gender are used as synonyms, I just told you that gender role is fluid. I told you sex is not fluid, but when you start use those terms interchangeably, the fluidity associated with gender roles and traits is transferred to sex, which then is looked upon as fluid as well. That's what has happened. The fluidity exists in gender role and gender trait. Once you use that term as one and the same, the fluidity has transferred to sex. Now, sex is fluid. That is a necessary prelude to the transgenderism of today. Sex fluidity is now seen first, but it was a result of transferring gender fluidity over to sex by way of presenting them as a synonymous term. They are not synonymous. Maleness, femaleness, biological sex. Femininity and masculinity, gender, social role and traits. While gender roles are cultural conditioned, therefore can change, malleable for the most part, physical and psychological differences between man and woman shouldn't be overlooked. Wait a minute, that's the traditional argument. You're going back to traditional world. It looks that way. They're not same. They're different. Says who? Physical difference between man and woman on average, male and female, male, more testosterone, female, less testosterone, male, only one type estrogen, estradiol, women produce all three. Men run faster, female run less faster, male lift heavier weight. I said on average. There are always exceptions. Lift less heavier weight because of biology. Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner now, she doesn't support Leah Thomas. After all, Bruce Jenner was champion of the world in decathlon, 1976 Montreal. So he's a sports person, so he doesn't agree with Leah Thomas swimming in women's competition, smashed all the record, said this. I'm saying this to underline the fact that physiology of female and male is different. Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner, Thomas was born as a biological boy. Her cardiovascular system is bigger. Her respiratory system is bigger. Her hands are bigger. She can swim faster. She shouldn't compete in women's competition. It's unfair. Well, that matter to be decided by NCAA. I'm just trying to show you that there is a physical difference. What we need to recognize, certain physiological difference between the two sexes generate distinctive character traits. Physiology affects psychology. Oh my goodness, you're going to traditional back hole again. Well, let's see whether I'm going to end up there. 2012 Psychology Today article, according to a study based on 10,000 samples. There are many studies like this. I just chose this one. This is what they found. Women's trait, sensitivity, warmth, apprehension. Men, emotional stability, dominance, rule consciousness, and vigilance. Offended? Simone de Beauvoir, French philosopher, friend of Sartre, very smart woman, and a pioneer of postmodern feminism. She once said, one is not born but rather becomes a woman. she didn't mean that there's no biological sex. It means that society tells women, you gotta be like this. So you become feminine woman who does work as a seamstress, submit to men. So therefore, you're not born as a woman, you become a woman because they impose on you what men prefer as woman's gender. That's what she meant. However, she said this. We talk about whether women and men are same or different. She said, women should not be judged to be equal only insofar as they are like men. Women and men are different. Yes. Where are you going with this? Does this affect gender roles? Can gender roles at home and in the workplace change with the passing of time despite biological and psychological differences between the sexes where certain traits are seen with certain role and other traits are seen going with some other roles? Or do these differences between males and females mandate what role each sex should play in society? Are the roles fixed forever? Okay, let me repeat some of the things I already said. While sexual identity is fixed, is biological, set in stone, gender role can be fluid for the most part, and gender traits can be overcome for the most part. Now, how can we make it possible for women to really do what they feel like they want to do, accomplish? First, with traditional social and cultural barriers against women moved to the side. So there needs to be some, when they say cultural conditioning, we need to change something. For example, inadequate maternity leave could be more favorable to a woman because they are going to have babies. They're going to stay home and win their babies. So when maternity leave is extended with more benefit, then they can go back and pick up where they left off. That's called cultural conditioning. So you move those kind of things. Second, with adequate encouragement for women to pursue their goal. Do it. You can do it. Bible, I can do everything through him who gives me strength. It's slightly out of context, but I'm going to use it anyway. Yeah, give it to him. Women, I don't know if I can be a scientist, Dad, because all the scientists are guys. You can do it. You can do it. Se puede. Entonces, vamos. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. You think that? Believe Jesus. Pray every day, and you can do it. Yeah. Encouragement. As society changes to move barriers for women, we can do all this without saying, by the way, biological sex is a social construct. You see, you don't have to do any of that to make this happen. You know, again, they do that not for the sake of transgenderism, to neutralize universal, biblical, moral, ethical values. That's what they're after. And it began with Mead, Benedict, and Boaz. They're the fathers and mothers of modern anthropology. Day one, they can overcome whatever differences between male and female traits, both physical and psychological. My definition of gender identity as it relates to women, unbelieving woman. I can do all things if I put my mind and effort to it. I don't recommend that. Believing woman, I can do all things if I put my mind and effort to it as the Lord leads me and strengthens me. Yeah, do that one. That's the new gender. You can do it. Whatever role you aspire, whatever traits that you may not have, effort, prayer, training. Yes. This is absolutely true regarding tasks involving intellect. Women can do what men can do or better. Anything to do with this. But with respect to tasks requiring strength and endurance, let's not ignore the obvious. Strength and endurance, highlighted by a biological male-turned transgender swimmer, Leah Thomas, dominating female swimmers, smashing all kinds of women records. 3 areas. You know, in sports, I can see women playing in NFL, punting or kicking field goals, but not lining up against a 6'5", 300-pound defensive line tackle, no matter how hard she trained. I'm afraid she will die. all sexist, no. Then you line up. All right. In the military, I can see female soldiers performing well in serving their duties, but for most of them, not in field requiring significant physical strength, like artillery division. They have to carry biggest guns you can think of. Infantry, most physically demanding. Most of them. I think it's reasonable. At home, while women on average are better suited physically and psychologically than men to raise children due to maternal instinct and ability to produce milk and nursing the baby with it, in a traditional world, this is where it stops. Okay, then women, you do that. But I'm saying men can also do it, at least adequately, so that moms who can earn more can work while dad stays home to take care of their kids. That seems pretty fair. What do you think? At least one is staying home. At least kids are with one parent. Makes economic sense. You are more than me, so I learn how to do the dishes and take care of home and raise kids, and you go make money. And that happens in some homes. Review. Sexual identity is determined by, sexual identity is determined by biology. Gender roles, for the most part, can change by removing social cultural barriers and through encouragement. Gender traits can be overcome, for the most part, though, through cultural conditioning and individual effort. Okay, what plausible conclusion can we draw? I'm going to wind down now. We must be intellectually honest in rejecting the push from the secular, progressive, cultural elites who demand that we submit to the dogma. Culture is sovereign. Yeah. I say culture is sovereign. Biological sex is social construct. It is not. Actually, there's another fish that's going to eat up the whole fish, and that fish is called God's word. Culture is not sovereign. God is sovereign. You Christians, God's word is equal to what Margaret Mead wrote to justify her lifestyle? I gotta believe that has something to do with looking for something. For everybody who has a hammer, everything looks like nail. I gotta believe why they were so interested in homosexuality in 1930s. I gotta believe that I don't want to feel bad what I'm doing. No, God is sovereign. No. God loves homosexuals. No problem with that. Okay? I'm just saying that those people were after neutralizing absolute truth of God's word to make it everything relative in the name of culture. So when scripture declares that God created male and female, it means the two sexes are biologically distinct, among other things. And when society ignores God's basic, when society ignores God's basic order by asserting that sexual identity is fluid, thereby enticing young people to switch their sexual identity as often as they feel like, it distorts the mindset of the vulnerable that in no way contributes to their mental and spiritual well-being. I talked to a few of them, so I speak from having talked to them. Those who truly suffer from genuine transgender struggle are far few in number. Not many are like Thomas, but there are there, I'm sure. A reasonable conclusion based on studies I've said. No Klinefelter syndrome, no Turner syndrome, no androgenesis syndrome, and no deficiency syndrome gives any warrant for the view that biological sex is a social construct. There's no biology, so don't give me that. Third, praise team. You can come on out now. Wow, the guy who was leading worship. The whole team was great. Okay. I'm a pastor, So when I spoke to this person in another state who wanted to change his sex, and we talked for a while, we must be sensitive to those few who do struggle with transgender tension. We must be merciful to those who doubt about sexual identity. But one thing that I will not do is I'm not going to just touch upon the external, merely reshaping the external. I will not do that. Because that's not where the problem originates from. But we will try to fix the internal problem of broken self. You do not fix broken bone by putting bandage. And that broken self originates from sin, eternal separation from God. That is human basic need, how to get back to God. We are alienated from ourselves. It manifests through different complexes. For some, it is transgender syndrome. For others, it may be different. That's the problem. We need to get back to God. But there's no bridge. And that bridge is Jesus Christ. Because God reconciled us to himself through Christ. He lit a bridge. And he took care of our sin problem, broken self, what we owed to God's cosmic justice system. The alien relationship between us and God. And Christ became our bridge by paying for the penalty of sin that we owed. By virtue of that, we have been, reconciled back to him. Does that solve every single problem? Of course not, but it's a great beginning. Therefore, Christ accepted you, but Christ accepted that you. The you that you were born with, not externally change self as if that's why they will be accepting me. Romans 57 entire thing said, therefore, accept one another, then just as Christ accepted you. As we experience Christ's acceptance of us as we really are, that we need people who accept us as we are. I've seen guys who are feminine. So stop things like, hey, you girly. No, accept him as he is. You know, that guy that I told you about? I didn't really notice anything, but he said he was bullied because to his friends he was kind of feminine. So he was bullied. Oh, bad social conditioning. So we accept one another as they are. It is because, in my simple thinking, when they're rejected, then they might think about, maybe I will change my sex. I know that's kind of a reductionistic way of thinking, but it seemed like that was what led him. You know how I know this? I'm going to end with this. It's not the same thing, but I don't really know transgender struggle, but I do know not liking my body problem. When I was in college, I was only Asian in a white environment in 1980s. And I had this complex, self-hate. I didn't like being Asian. I guess you call that kind of person banana, right? I want to be white. I met so many white kids. And one thing that really made me feel inferior was height. Now, I'm not that short. I'm 5'9.5". But all my friends were 6'1", 6'2". Like, they were tall, right? And I always felt inferior. Like, oh my goodness. And then one day, I had this ingenious idea. Why don't I cut the sole from my old shoes and stick it into my old Nike high top? I get an inch. All right. So I did that. And ever since then, I felt so confident. Right? I felt so confident because now I have an inch and nobody knows. It had to be high top because they cannot find out, right? Right. It's around then that I got saved in Los Angeles. I was in Virginia. I got saved. So now I live in Los Angeles, 1980, all Koreans, Korean town. And I happen to live in the church to be discipled by my pastor. And we will kind of visit Korean houses, to eat and to have family worship. So we didn't eat all that well in the church, but whenever we go to these houses, we ate good, right? So I'm thinking, all right, let's go to the house of this Deacon Kim. And then a horrifying thought. In Korean house, you have to take off your shoes. And I go, oh my goodness, I have to take off my shoes and they're gonna find out and they're gonna make laugh. So this is life of no freedom. So let's go in. Oh yeah, you guys go ahead. I just stretch a little bit. Oh, I'm just looking around where I can hide my shoes. And after I went in, I would find a good spot and just put it away. Make sure they don't find it. I was taller. The funny thing is, with the Koreans, I was tallest, among the tallest. But it didn't matter though. It was inside issue. Right, it's inside issue. Now I was taller than most Koreans, but I still had to wear it. I didn't get rid of it right away. I was Christian, all right. But in time, as I grew, as people accept me as who I am, I don't exactly remember when I got rid of it, but I don't wear it anymore. Right. I like to frame those with transgender syndrome or tension in that sense. We need to accept ourselves as we are. And we are greatly helped when we know that Christ accepted us as we are, when people around us accept us as we are. I think that's one good way to accept those who are having genuine transgender tension. That's my opinion, and that's what I shared with that person that day. And I just got I found out that he didn't have a sex change. He's just living a normal life. I'm not saying that his life is perfect. I don't know him that well. That's what I shared. I'm going to share that with you. So never mind transgenderism now. So do you like your body? Should we never try to change our body? Oh, no, exercise. We do all of that. But that is never the number one solution for self-acceptance. We accept ourselves as God sees us, as made us. And then we could work on, run, lift weight, all good things. Not for the sake of self-acceptance, so that other people can accept us. If you're in that environment, that's not a healthy environment. So we're in church. Hopefully we do things differently. Okay, thank you for putting up with me. I'm going to pray, and then they can go into the next section. Okay, let's pray. Lord, I am not expert in this. I just want to learn. Yes, I was surprised to learn what I learned, actually. Lord, we live in a world that is like no other time that I have seen in my 61 years of life. I think we need to be serious about our faith right now. There's so many uncertainties. And we're going to put our hope and faith in Jesus, who's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we want to share this acceptance in Christ with others who are subjecting and share God's acceptance through Christ by telling them that God loves you because that obstacle had been removed by the sacrifice of Jesus, who took away all our sins by dying on the cross. Continue to bless our young people who are inundating with so many disinformation and misinformation. May they become expert of the information that saves us, truth of God, the scripture. Bless the rest of this worship. We love you in Jesus' name.